Hey, I'm Josh, co-founder and CEO of Hugo.
And I'm Asher, Head of Customer Engagement at Hugo as well.
In today's webinar, we'll be taking a look at helping VPs and leaders of CS organizations to flip their weekly meetings from something that's generally a time suck to something that's time well spent. We'll show you ways to leverage meetings as a means of achieving productivity gains for your team and for driving valuable insights across the rest of the business. When you are a customer success leader, you're in charge of a team. The number of meetings you have is probably high and probably increasing over time as well, especially with everyone distributed from home. You need to find ways to operationalize and scale the process for your team so that they can be successful without you. Any software that your team uses needs to align and assist with these two goals. Firstly, it needs to provide a workflow that unleashes your team, not something that gets in the way. And also, it needs to provide visibility for the voice of the customer throughout the rest of the business. Let's take a look at common meetings that you encounter and how you can use processes in Hugo to improve your overall efficiency, gain valuable insights into how your team is performing, and shorten meeting length to give yourself and everyone else more time back to get their work done. I'm going to hand over to my colleague and the head of our CS org to kick things off. Let's get started.
All right, thanks, Josh. Yeah, so first up are one-on-one meetings. These are really valuable as a manager and an important way to build trust, increase team productivity, and gain alignment across your CS team. So a lot of managers tend to handle one-on-one meetings as casual catch-ups with their staff, which is good, but sometimes it can be a missed opportunity. And so one of the things that we talk about at Hugo is that one-on-one meetings need to be treated with the same amount of prep work and forethought as an external customer meeting. So instead of asking generalized questions like, what customers are happy? How are your customers doing? Who's disappointed with our services? Things like that, general questions. Having a recurring agenda or a set structure ahead of time that both parties can contribute to in a sort of standardized way really helps this process. This way you can use the time as an opportunity to check in on updates and information, critical information to the business that you need to obtain during that time. So try structuring some of the one-on-one meetings with specific areas of focus, such as what are your key customer health scores and how are they trending over the time? Are there important indicators like risks and usage indicators for your teams? Are there opportunities that you can share with your manager or CS lead as well? Maybe things like NPS trends, are they changing dramatically or not? Being able to show some insights around some of those key trends with your customers. And then maybe another one is upcoming renewals or important upcoming renewals. Having those sort of set questions to your reports and to your team leads gives you oversight around key performances and allows you to focus on key indicators with each team member.
100%. That's a really good point, Asha. It doesn't just empower you, right? It empowers your team to have the information that they need when they're talking to customers. And it relates to something that is a very strong part of the culture here at Hugo, which is that week-on-week progress. So these things, these areas that are really important to how your team is functioning and performing and hitting their goals, we make sure at Hugo that always gets baked into the reoccurring templates for our meeting agendas so that we know we're going to chip away at the right set of things every time and no one's going to forget to talk about the stuff that matters most. And that's actually a good segue into a couple use cases for Hugo. If you feel stuck on where to start with those one-on-ones and getting the right template set up, you can actually just grab something from the template library in the product that we've pre-built for you. And from there, you can make your own modifications as you realize you want to tweak the process for those week-on-week gains. The second way that you can use Hugo to improve this process for one-on-ones is around searching for them so that you can quickly get up to speed from your last conversation when you're getting ready for the next one. So in the left-hand bar, if you go to Team Docs, then you'll notice that there's a section at the top where you can build out a filter by meeting name, in this case probably one-on-one. It's going to pull up every meeting with that title, and you can even drill down even further by adding additional filters like the attendee or the author or something that's mentioned in the agenda text. And once you have the meetings that you want displayed in that list, you can actually save that search so that it's easily accessible for repeat use in the future, almost like a feed for the certain types of meetings that you're looking for. So I love this. Asher sees a lot of customers do this as well. You kind of have feeds for different reports, so that it's very easy to just click into it from the left nav bar and see what you last discussed, or even go further back, and then it makes that meeting continuity a theme that's really strong in your workflow with your reports.
Yeah, I think that's something that I hear a lot from teams, especially around one-on-ones, is the ability to quickly see within a click, like what was discussed last week, what did I say that we were going to work on next week, what were some of the key blockers that we were trying to fix, for example, and being able to just report back on that so you can have that continuity and consistency week over week. So I wanted to share as well, with one-on-ones, they can obviously vary from team to team, company to company, but some core structures and frameworks that I've seen really successful with high-performing teams with their weekly one-on-ones is like a few key areas that I thought would be interesting to share. So one of the structures and frameworks is around issues experienced that week. This is about like identifying blockers, as I mentioned, and providing support for your team. What can we do better? What are the issues? How do we fix that going forward? So that's a really key one there. And it's helping teams, and especially as a manager, helping ways to create value for your team and for the organization as well. Another nice one that I like is around topics to discuss. And this sort of seems generic, but it's about, for one-on-ones, about providing a space for open discussion. How can I provide guidance or recommendations to my direct report, for example? And rather than using the one-on-one time just for updates, having a whole section on what are the areas to discuss and open discussion points can be really, really valuable. Another one as well that I think is interesting is around plans for this week or next week. And what I like about this, and where I see teams doing really well, is around doing this collaboratively. So with yourself and the team lead, or vice versa, building out what are we going to work on this week and next week. And this is about ongoing alignment and alignment around what are the priorities for yourself, for the team, and for the business. Just as a side anecdote, an interesting one that a customer shared with me is, what are the 3 most important things that you need to get done by this time next meeting? And that can be a really powerful question or prompt for your one-on-one meetings to make sure that the right things are being actioned and worked on.
Yeah, Ash, just to build on something you said there, a dynamic that Hugo unlocks for meetings, which is new for a lot of teams, is thinking about these one-on-ones as something where both of the participants or multiple participants are actually contributing to the agenda ahead of time, because you get that asynchronous dynamic where someone adds something to the agenda, it notifies the other attendees, and then it gives them time to mentally prepare, think about what they want to discuss before the meeting begins. And so when you've got that two-way dynamic, these types of agenda items that you're raising, like topics to discuss, going through feedback and blockers, going through the plan for this week and next week, having a section that gives people time to think about open discussion items, it actually makes them even more collaborative, because you get everyone having the ability to actually drop in some bullet points and think about what they want to discuss when they actually come together, as opposed to hearing it for the first time when the meeting begins. So I think that's an important dynamic that actually amplifies a lot of the structure that you're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of relates. It's interesting as well. I wanted to share a little bit about metrics and sharing metrics in one-on-one meetings. It's going to be different for every person, every role, every team. But some of the few key areas that you can think about, one are like, what are the key indicators, the key KPIs, the key OKRs, for example, that are pertinent to your goals, and making sure that you're sharing them in those weekly one-on-ones. And as I mentioned, insights over updates. Think about progress, key trends, key indicators, important changes that you should be sharing with your team lead, for example. And a nice way to do that, and what I see really effective, is to split between what went well and what can be improved. And having those sort of 2 sections in your agenda or in your meeting note, for example, so you can very clearly share those trends and updates with your team.
Yeah, those are great points, Asha. I find that there's obviously another category of meetings for CS leaders, which is not from their interactions between themselves and their direct reports, but between themselves and the C-suite in the business, and being able to look at those meetings with their reports and have that insights over updates kind of theme in their documents and what's going well and what could be improved, and then to be able to easily package that up because it's just so accessible in Hugo, and then communicate that when necessary to executives in the business, it is another massive benefit of running meetings a little bit differently and just having all of that at hand when it's needed. So as I alluded to, C-suite is going to want to focus more on the high-level stuff and not the day-to-day or getting in the weeds of your team's performance and sort of the tactics. And so by running your meetings with your direct reports in a way that you can split out the high-level stuff from some of the metrics and more of the low-level day-to-day, it then obviously makes your job easier when you are dealing with C-suite and you want to extract those high-level themes. An important thing to decipher in meetings at this level, it's not just about the analytics and the data. You want to also allow people to be focused on what they need from the company to be more successful. So it's not just, hey, here's the job that we're doing, here's how we're performing. But if we want to get to that next level of performance, using those C-suite meetings as a way to communicate future needs is a really good way to think about things as well. So everything from headcount and tools, which are the obvious ones, but even to the processes that are going to ensure that you're providing or your team is providing sufficient exposure of the VOC, the voice of the customer, to other key departments in the business, like product and marketing, who need to make sure that they're always plugged into that torrent of customer feedback that your team is generating.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like any other meeting, the most successful meetings at this level are prepared in advance and planned as well in advance. And so even though the metrics that you report on differ from team to team or culture to culture, right? So I won't have the best answer for you for exactly what to share in the meeting document, but handling a C-suite meeting starts with creating a collaborative document and allowing all the parties to input and prepare in advance. So what this does is having that prep in advance lets you know if there's something missing in the agenda that the C-suite team wants to discuss or see. It also allows you to assign core parts of the discussion to the rest of the team and helps you collaborate and build that asynchronous work to make sure that the document and the meeting is the most effective as possible.
Absolutely. And so as the CEO myself, I've experienced the ways that different people on the team, how we've tried to run these meetings in the past, and getting a little bit creative or broadening your view of what types of content you include to leverage that preparation piece goes a long way to making the meeting itself more successful. So as an example, there's a lot of process change that Asha has been looking into recently, and he wanted to propose making a few adjustments to the way we're leveraging some tools and some members of the team in that process. And he actually just recorded a quick Loom video walking us through the tool and the changes he wanted to make. He also showed some data that justified sort of what was triggering the change and what he expects to happen afterwards. He included a link to that in the agenda, and then I was able to actually watch it ahead of time, kind of gather my thoughts, and then the discussion in the meeting was way more fruitful than if I was hearing it for the first time as a bit of a surprise in the meeting. So it's also just about getting creative around what you include ahead of time when your team develops this new habit around, collaboratively preparing and doing it, leaning into that asynchronous approach to preparation before meetings begin.
Yeah, Josh, that's right, absolutely. And the way that I think about preparing for meetings in advance is thinking about the story, what's happened, provide context and information, as well as key trends or changes that you need to share, and sharing that beforehand so you can use the time in the meeting to have an actual discussion around the proposed changes or the way that you seek to make the change. And so what I really like from a Hugo perspective is that within a couple clicks, you can gain all that valuable insight. You can gain all the touch points and conversations from your customers. So from a CS perspective, I can go back and look at really quickly within a couple of clicks, what were the key conversations that we were having with customers? What were some of the insights or decisions that happened during customer meetings that I can share back with you and collate those all together? So using Hugo, I can have a couple of clicks to see past conversations, bring up information and bring them forward to our touch points. So you can also review your customer accounts by easily searching for the meetings that your CSMs have had to date. So we provide features like filters and save searches so you can view specific companies that you've met with or that you want to pull information from. So this way, at a click, within a couple clicks, you can gain some valuable insights into the touch points, the conversations, the next steps, the actions decided on with your customers. It also allows you to really quickly assess for things like QBRs, who are at risk. What are some of the conversations that have been happening recently with those at-risk companies? Review the approaches or the next steps that the CSMs, for example, have provided. You can also look at things like what are the upsell opportunities, what are the cross-sell opportunities without even attending a meeting, which is really fantastic. So there are all different ways that you can review beforehand. There are a ton of other great use cases as well, which I want to touch on. So one is very quickly preparing for customer meetings. So like I mentioned, having past meetings at your fingertips, structured notes, all within a couple of clicks. It's really great to also share customer insights directly to product, sales, and to the executive team. And I love this a lot, and I hear about this a lot with our customers, is instead of going through a typical process where you're synthesizing information or waiting for a monthly review, for example, this gives you direct ability to share to other departments and other teams within a couple of clicks as well. Lastly is integration. So what I love about this part is integrating directly with the tools that you use. So making sure that the meetings are connected to your CRM. If there are key projects that your meeting is related to, making sure that it's synced to your project management tool like Asana, for example, or any customer support tools if there's a action that needs to be addressed within your customer support or engineering team. So it can really, really go beyond just C-suite meetings and be useful for all different types of meetings as well.
I also think, Asher, it's important to note, obviously a lot of these meetings wouldn't be successful without your CS team behind you. So maybe let's kind of go beyond the one-on-ones and beyond those customer meetings and look at how these types of processes, combined with Hugo, can make your CS team meetings more effective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting, the weekly team meetings, what I see is it's typically the main opportunity or sometimes the only opportunity each week to connect face-to-face with the whole team, to connect and touch base on project statuses and make sure that everyone's involved in key decisions. And so it's crucial that time together is really effective. And we know from our research, which is another conversation, but we know that when meetings aren't prepared for or not prepared well, they can be a distraction and they can be unproductive, an unproductive use of time. So as a CS team lead or as a team lead in general, you kind of want to avoid that. So I thought it'd be helpful as well to share a few ways that Hugo helps to lead efficient, productive team meetings.
And obviously, before you get into that, when you are running that prep process more effectively, the irony is it doesn't actually just improve what happens in the meeting, but our research also shows it often cuts the meeting time down. So everyone wants to get out of there as quickly as possible. They got a lot of other stuff on their plate. Preparing an agenda in advance and getting some of those updates and talking points out the way ahead of time is a really strong method to doing that.
Yeah, I've got a few cool stories about that, but also not just time, but headcount too. Sometimes you might find if you have a big team, some areas of discussion aren't needed for everyone. And so some people can actually skip the meeting and just get the synopsis or the summary, right? They don't need to be part of some of that discussion. So it's been really cool talking to teams that have prepared so well beforehand that Some people don't necessarily need to be in that meeting and they get that time back. And also, as you said, have cut meeting time down as a total as well. A couple of key things to think about with your CS team meetings and team meetings in general is start with a purpose or an objective. This is really, really important. It's not just the title of the meeting. A purpose is why the meeting exists. Why are you meeting up this week? Not just to catch up, but it's to maybe decide on a new customer onboarding process, for an example. So that's a really key start to the process and making sure you have an effective team meeting. The next one is preparing an agenda beforehand. And I know we sort of touch on this, so I won't go too deep here, but it's a really important step to make sure that everyone knows what to expect. They can come prepared as well to the discussion with relevant points or relevant opinions and insights. And so that's a really, really key part to make sure that you're not wasting any time, everyone's up to date, and they're all aligned on exactly what's happening. The last meeting, and probably the most well-known CS meeting, is the QBR. And I thought I wanted to talk about this because the QBR is your chance to show your customers how your product and how your business is driving an ROI for some of your most strategic customers. The key things that I kind of want to talk about here is preparation for this meeting is really, really important. You've got to prepare in advance and also align on the goals and outcomes that you want, but also your customers want as well from this meeting. Why it's also really important and imperative to get this meeting right is that information from QBRs goes beyond just the CS motions, right? It informs the whole business. It's a really great opportunity for feedback loops with sales. How do we get better customers in the door? Marketing, help with messaging and strategy and acquisition. Product, feedback on product insights or integration or feature requests or things like that. So really, really key to get this type of meeting correct. There are a lot of different structures and different ways you can run your QBRs. So I won't go into the specifics of how to, run each type of QBR. We have a bunch of templates in our library of best practices that you should definitely check out and have a look at. But I thought I would share some key ways that Hugo has been helping CS teams run their QBR meetings. So the first way that we help is around preparation. And we've talked a little bit about this, but what I wanted to get into is collating and synthesizing and distilling the last quarter of activity into one meeting can be difficult. And Hugo helps with this because you can go back and see discussions that are relevant and make sure that their context is all there. So within a couple of clicks, as we talked about, we can collate all the past meetings, see what's been saved, have a look at all the different meetings for each customer, and include that within your preparation before going into the QBR. So you can understand any support issues. How many were there? What were the severity? What were the topics of the support issues? Are there any still outstanding, for example? These are really key preparation insights and topics. Things like challenges. What were they solving with your product when they started? Maybe looking back at the sales documentation in sales meetings or early onboarding meetings as well. So having a look at some of that information is really, really helpful. And then lastly, insights from past meetings that the CSMs have gleaned and collated as well. So having all of that as part of the preparation can really, really help with having a successful QBR meeting. So the other area of how Hugo helps with QBRs is around action and actionability. So it's great to prepare and it's very important, but it's equally as important to make sure that the discussion and all that work that you went to have that meeting is actionable and progresses towards your goals, your customers' goals, and their needs. And so Hugo makes actioning really, really easy. We talked a little bit about app integrations, but syncing to your CRM, making sure that this discussion is synced directly to Slack or to HubSpot or to whatever you're using automatically so that conversation isn't lost. Sharing notes with everyone is really key. And what I've seen as well is that teams have a dedicated QBR Slack channel, for example, or a dedicated QBR tag that helps teams really easily search and share that information. So reducing any knowledge silos and making sure that you can sync those directly to the right places and to the right people is really, really crucial. A cool thing that you may not know about, but the integrations with Slack and Loom sort of helps that as well. So you can record a video of yourself with a synopsis and summary, maybe it's a TLDR type video recording, and share that directly to the team so they don't have to read the whole document, for example. So it can really, really help with making information sharing really easy. And the last thing around actions as well is preset actions. So within our template functionality, you can preset next steps. So rather than relying on the discussion and waiting to hear what has to be said, some things that you might know in terms of process, and what we see really good teams think about next steps already, is presetting some of those meeting actions. So for example, a follow-up email, or updating customer health score after the QBR. Do we need to change it? Are there risks involved now that we need to change in our CRM system or our customer success platform? So having preset actions in your QBR templates can really help to make sure that actionability is there and that the right next steps are happening.
Yeah, and also just to tie all this together, you've touched on a lot of different themes here, Ash, not just about how to run those meetings and tweaking and optimizing the process, but then also sharing and exposing that information to the rest of the business. I just want to, that last key piece to bring all of this together is decisions. It's really important to list out what are the decisions that are coming out of each meeting in their own section, or have some way to make it really easy and scannable for other people in the business that might be reading those documents later on. So it could be you checking the document from last week to get ready for the next meeting, or it could be someone else in the business, like an executive who just wants to follow what's been happening in other meetings. Making it super easy to just scan across those decisions and know what's coming out of the meeting is really important. For us at Hugo, we've just made a very simple internal process. A decision gets highlighted in orange, and then it's very easy. Everyone in the company knows that's the way it works. If you're looking at a doc, you look for the orange bits and you know those are the next steps. There are other teams that have different processes there, but whatever works for you, calling out decisions and making them glanceable for someone else in the business is going to make that document sort of even more helpful in terms of how people are operating day to day asynchronously. Ash, this has been great. It's actually making me realize just the degree of complexity that CS teams kind of facing every single day, every week, right? They have to worry about having an awesome process for the way they interact with customers, which obviously you've just touched on. But then earlier we were talking about having a lot of focus on how they optimize their one-on-ones and team meetings as well, because everything, how they deal with customers, how they deal with each other, how they deal with the rest of the business, all that stuff is really critical. It manifests in the way meetings are being run. And so you've really you've touched the whole gamut there of what these CS teams need to be thinking about and improving. So thank you for that. Every meeting that you have obviously can be made more effective, as we've touched on, by bringing the right information to the table and with the right preparation and follow-up practices and highlighting decisions and those sorts of things. Obviously at Hugo, we live and breathe making every meeting worth it. That's how we think about things. We aim to educate people about meeting best practices before, during, and after the meeting. And the way we think about the product is obviously baking those best practices into the way that you interact with it. And that's also, I think, tying into, how we think about making Hugo as accessible as possible. You can actually use the product for free for up to 10 users. We want as many teams to get value and improve their meetings without having to think about the friction of a credit card and those sorts of things. So give our product a try. It's, as I said, free for up to 10 users. It's been an absolute pleasure tapping into, the person that runs customer success at Hugo and is actually showing customer success teams how to be more successful themselves. So that's a very meta concept. We'd love to see the templates that you're creating off the back of this webinar if we're giving you good ideas. So feel free to reach out. And as I always say to my team after our meetings, we will see you online. Thank you.